You're listening to the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, and yes, konnichiwa. Welcome to your NXT audio report for Wednesday, December 28th, 2016. It's the last NXT of the year. My name is Arya Whitner. Thank you all for listening. Tonight, we had 2 hours from the Osaka house show from earlier this month. In case you're sitting there wondering, wait, didn't you review that Samoa Joe Shinsuke Nakamura match 3 weeks ago? I'll be like, yes I did. Now I'm going to review it again. This show would have been so much better at an hour. Honestly, this show would have been so much better had they only shown the main event and the tag title match. This match, like the last time they tried to do a extended edition of NXT, it was just, I don't want to say too much filler, but so much of it just seemed, so useless. I mean, I could see why they had the Asuka match on here, but the Asuka match was not very good. It was basically, there were 5 matches here, 3 of them were house show matches, and 2 of them had people actually trying. But let's get into this here. Before we really get going, do you think it'll ever be explained why the shows aired in the order that they did? Why didn't they air this Osaka show back on December 14th and the Australia show on the 21st? And then the shows that aired those 2 weeks with the number one contender situation, why didn't they air this week and next week? At least this way, everything is airing in order. Like, we're not having to rewatch the Joe Nakamura match 2 weeks after we've already seen it, or 3 weeks actually after we've already seen it. Like, you could have shown highlights the first time and say, hey, next week we're going to show the whole thing, dang it. But nope, this is what we got. But let's begin with a rematch from NXT TakeOver Dallas. In fact, it's a rematch that the only way you saw the original is if you were there in the arena, because ONeill Orkin versus Andrade Cien Almas was the dark match in Dallas way back when they were Manny Andrade and Chris Gerard, before they both got name changes that honestly are worse than their originals. Almas came out in his La Sombra mask before unmasking for the match. If you are a fan of chin locks and headlocks, then the first half of this match is the match for you. Both men made excessive use of rest holds. When they finally stood up, things picked up, but for the longest time, this crowd was dead for this match. Things finally picked up when Lorcan hit a running blockbuster for a 2 count. The fans, like I said, got into it once both men actually stopped with the rest holds. Lorcan did several corner charges, but on the third one, he got hip-tossed into the turnbuckles. And the finish saw Lorcan hit Lorcan hit an exploder suplex from the top rope. I thought to myself, man, that's a big move to kick out of, and then almost didn't kick out. Lorcan pins Andrade Cien Almas, a bit of a surprise. Lorcan, by the way, has now pinned both Almas and Ty Dillinger. That brings us to our next match, Liv Morgan and Aaliyah versus Peyton, Royce, and Billie Kay. The match seemed at times to be an excuse for Corey Graves to tell every New Jersey joke that he knows. Liv took Peyton for a ride in the highlight of the match, where she slapped on a body scissors and then rolled all over the ring, getting about a dozen 1 counts during the 1 second that Peyton's shoulders would be on the mat. The heels got the heat on Aaliyah, and they got the heat on Aaliyah, and they got the heat on Aaliyah, and then they got the heat on Aaliyah. And while they were doing that, they also got the heat on Aaliyah. Finally, after about 3.5 hours of getting the heat, Aaliyah made the hot tag to Liv, and Liv ran wild on both ladies. Aaliyah, who, by the way, just gotten her butt kicked for approximately 14 consecutive days, ran back in like a house on fire. However, she, unfortunately, I don't know if they just have no confidence in her offense, if there's no confidence in her at all, but she never accomplishes anything, and every time she ever attempts anything, she fails horribly and miserably. She got thrown out of the ring here with very little effort, and Billie Kay pinned Liv after a bulldog where Liv had her face smashed off Peyton's knee. Up next was the show-stealing match, DIY, Ciampa and Gargano defending the NXT Tag Team Championship against Tajiri and Akira Tozawa. This was the first match where it seemed like the people involved were going out of their way to actually have a good match as opposed to a house show match like everyone else seemed to have had. Tozawa, by the way, who is yet to have a match on 205 Live, and I think, and I could be wrong, but I think the only cruiserweight match he's had since signing, I don't even remember if he was actually in this one, was that four-way the first night of the cruiserweight division. I'd have to look up, and I don't remember if he was in that match or not. But either way, he's here teaming with Tajiri to challenge for the 7 pounds of gold. Tom Phillips referred to Tajiri as a veteran, which implied that Ciampa, Gargano, and Tozawa were all rookies, despite all three of them being in wrestling for 11 years. All four men worked as baby faces here. Tozawa at times was more of a tweener, but he never was a full-blown heel. Tozawa and Ciampa traded hard knife-edge chops, much to the delight of the crowd. We had a four-way brawl breakout, with Tozawa hitting multiple suicide dives to the champions on the outside. Tozawa actually did most of the match for the team, as Tajiri would get in here and there, but, it was mostly his partner, which is hilarious that in this basically a 2-on-1 handicap match, Tozawa being the one to beat up both champions on his own. Tajiri did get Gargano down and went for the kick of death, but Gargano rolled out of the way and kicked Tajiri in the head. Tozawa used a deadlift, delayed German suplex, and a bicycle kick to the back of Ciampa's head, but Ciampa took his head off with a clothesline and then used a powerbomb onto his knees. Finally, Ciampa and Gargano retained the gold with the running knees to a down Tozawa. The Empress of Tomorrow was next. Asuka defending the women's title against Nia Jax. Jax, if you recall, was unsuccessful in her first attempt at beating Asuka back at NXT TakeOver, the end. But can tonight be her night? Spoiler, no. No, it wasn't. They tried to work a match that made you think Nia had a chance, but no one in the arena believed that she'd be taking the title to Raw. It was a solid match, but again, nothing you wouldn't see at a house show. They did have a rough spot in the middle where Nia went for a Samoan drop, but something went wrong and they fell on each other. Asuka got on a knee bar that Nia sold like near death until she got out of it. Then it was like it never happened. The Japanese crowd reacted very much in a way that American crowds do, both the good and the bad, as when Nia Jax had knocked Asuka out of the ring and the referee was making the count out. Instead of counting along with the referee, the fans loudly and vociferously chanted 10, 10, 10. I really hope that if and when Ty Dillinger gets called up to the main roster, that he doesn't get heat for having a gimmick that's quote-unquote too over. Anyway, Asuka went for every submission that she knows, but Nia not only did not tap, but somehow turned a triangle choke into a powerbomb. Asuka moved out of the way of a corner splash, chopped down the large woman before winning with a roundhouse kick to the head of Nia Jax. Main event time! Samoa Joe, your NXT champion, versus Shinsuke Nakamura. You might recall that I've reviewed this match already. Back about 3 weeks ago, they aired about 11 minutes of this match and actually had edited out a good 7 to 8 minutes of the match right in the middle. This time, they actually aired the full match, and I must say the full match was so much better than the clip that we got the first time. I basically reusing my review, adding in a few things here, so if any of what I'm saying sounds familiar, that's because it is. The fans took to this in a way American audiences would, singing along with the ring announcer's introductions, singing Nakamura's theme song, flooding the ring with streamers during the intros. Nakamura had the early advantage until Joe pulled the referee in between them and cheated to take the advantage. This is where, during the original airing, they jumped to the finish. However, this time, they aired the full match. Joe removed the top half of the steps outside the ring, which was not aired the first time, and they would eventually come back to it. Joe worked over the knees of Nakamura, which, like I said, made the match make more sense because when we resumed where we originally left off, Joe had on an STF that he turned into a crossface, and Nakamura was limping and selling his knees like death. Both men were covered in sweat and selling the effects of this lengthy battle. Nakamura did get out of that crossface and went for the Kinshasa, but Joe turned it into a twisting power slam for a near fall. Nakamura got out of the muscle buster. Joe ducked under the Kinshasa and locked on the Coquina clutch. Nakamura started slipping out, so Joe dropped him with a series of German suplexes. They fought outside. Joe went to give the Uranage on those ring steps from earlier, but the challenger got away with elbows and actually dropped Joe on the ring steps. Back in the ring, Nakamura hit the knee to the back of Joe's head and a Kinshasa to the front of Joe's head. And yes, for the second time in 3 weeks, I get to announce Shinsuke Nakamura is once again your NXT champion. Like I said, the match was better the second time around, as you got to see everything as opposed to earlier. The title lineage of NXT now reads Seth Rollins, Big E Langston, Bo Dallas, Adrian Neville, Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, Finn Balor, Samoa Joe, Shinsuke Nakamura, Samoa Joe, and Shinsuke Nakamura. The king is dead. Long live the new king. Thank you all for listening. Next week, we go from Japan back to Australia and for 2017. So, thank you all for listening. And I hope you all have a safe and happy new year. And I'll talk to you again in 7 days.